I was a teenager with nothing to lose. I mean, how much lower than broke could you possibly go? I left home very early, right about 15 years old, and got into the electronic music scene, the rave scene, and decided that I wanted to invent an alternative to the biggest party drug of the time, ecstasy. I invented a magic pill, and by the time I was 18, we had created over $1 billion in revenue.
What do you think was the biggest mistake you made in that period, and what did it teach you?
When you're coming up with something new, when you're coming up with a new idea or you're creating something, it's a messy process. Your ideas are everywhere, your things are everywhere, maybe you're spending your money. Everything is a mess. There is a storm before the calm. So I thought a lot about this, and I think the biggest mistake that anybody could make is...
Shaahin, welcome to the Ginny Show. I was reading up about you before, I bought my iPad over. I was like, damn, this guy, before he turned 18, the things that you did. When I was 15, I'll tell you what I was doing. I was working at KFC in Clayton, Australia, Melbourne, Australia, earning $5 an hour AUD, which if we do the currency conversion now, it's about $3.50 USD an hour. That's what I was doing at 15. I was in year 10. I hated history in my school. But you created Herbal Ecstasy, the company. So tell me, how at 15 did this idea pop into your head? Can you walk me through how your entrepreneurial journey began?
Look, I don't think there's anything wrong with working at KFC. In fact, despite my kid being a rich kid, I hope to God that he ends up taking a job to kind of learn what work actually is. I think especially when you're getting your start in the world, it makes a lot of sense. The difference is that going to be a lifetime for you, or are you there to learn and to move on? And I think that's the key thing. For me, I always felt like I was on a different path. And I started when I was very young. We were immigrants from Iran moving to the United States. And we were pretty poor and didn't have a lot of money. I mean, we were middle class in Iran. Coming to the United States, we had to leave most of our things behind. So we were fairly poor. And I left home very early, right about 15 years old, and got into the electronic music scene, the rave scene of the early 1990s, and decided that I wanted to invent an alternative to the biggest party drug of the time, ecstasy. So after some messing about and, messing around, finding out, I came up with a formula. I invented a magic pill. And by the time I was 18, or roughly about then, we had created over $1 billion in revenue. And now there's going to be a big film about this. Paris Hilton is producing the film based on my life. And I'm pretty excited about that. I wrote a book on it called Billion, How I Became King of the Thrill Pill Cult. But a lot of it was just trial and error. And a lot of it was just pure immigrant hunger.
I love that you shared that, because when you said that you moved out of home when you were 15 and you kind of saw, in the scene that you were involved in, the rave scene. I mean, I wasn't as flexible to be a raver in my time. Shaahin, if my rave kind of looked like I was trying to be a robot and probably like one of those, those ballerinas that you find in those jewelry boxes? I think people were like, is she raving or is she trying to do some form of ballet? That was kind of my style. But I want to ask you too, when did you see this being a problem? Because I love the entrepreneurial spirit in you. You saw a problem and you're like, okay, there is a rave scene here. There's ecstasy that's not good for you in the long run. Obviously, the effects it has on your cardio and your heart and everything. So tell me, how did you come to that? Walk me through the product creation of it.
Yeah, pretty easy. So I left home. I was dead broke, didn't have any money, didn't have anywhere to sleep. I did have a car, so I slept in the car until I had to sell or give away the car, and then I was sleeping on the beach. I had nothing. And I was going to the clubs, kind of sleeping behind the speakers, just because the clubs would go late and it would be somewhere I could crash. And during the day, kind of taking on odd jobs just to eat. And I realized that the people who were making money at that time were not the DJs. They were broke. It was not the club promoters. They were broke. But it was these guys that would walk around. They'd have nice clothes, beautiful women all around them, nice cars. And I'd be like, man, I want that. How do I get that? What do those guys do? Turns out you'll never guess who they were, Jeannie.
The drug dealers.
Oh my God, you said it, not me. Okay, right. So I look back to my life of crime as an adolescent coming to this country, not speaking English, selling weird stolen things at school, gum, glue, whatever you could get. Back when Playboy was a thing, we would sell pages of that and behind the boys' lockers just to make a little bit of money. But the problem was I was a terrible criminal. I would always get caught. And looking back, I thought to myself, I was like, dude, you are freaking bad at crime. You should not do crime. But I wanted the spoils. And it occurred to me that these guys were selling ecstasy. The supply had completely dried up in the early 90s with the Just Say No and the Dare and all the aggressiveness from the government to ban that stuff. They were actually doing a fairly effective job. So the supply of it had dried up, but the demand had increased higher than ever. More people than ever were going out partying and using it for all kinds of things. And I thought to myself, well, what if I came up with an alternative that was legal, that was safe using herbs, and I sold it on the open market and through the clandestine market, sold it through this distribution of these drug dealers, these alternative distributors that I saw them as. And so I went to work and, I'm sure there were a lot of people telling me that it was impossible. But when you got nothing to lose, you're probably one of the most dangerous people on the planet. And at that time, I was a teenager with nothing to lose. I mean, how much lower than broke could you possibly go? So some way, shape, and form, made it happen. And again, I outline it in my book, Billion: How I Became King of the Thropo Cult. It's on Amazon. There's an Audible book, and then in the next year or two, there will be a film coming out about it. So yeah, I write about that and the process.
There's a lot of questions I have from what you just said there. The first question, you slept behind a speaker. Now, was this when the club was thumping or when the
Yeah,
club, everybody?
yeah.
How
So
did you sleep, bro? And how do you sleep now? Are you like one of those heavy sleepers? Like if there's an earthquake going on in California, like Shaahin still asleep? Does your wife have to kind of be like, Shaahin, wake up? How does that go?
no, she's the one who doesn't sleep. I mean, I sleep pretty good. My kid, we've got a kid, that's the biggest enemy to sleep. But other than that, yeah, no, I sleep pretty well. What most people don't know is in front of the speaker is very loud, behind the speaker is very quiet. So it's actually an ideal place to sleep. And at the time, you just get behind the speakers, you just get this humming vibration. It would just put me to sleep. Right. Not that I got a lot of sleep in my teens, probably, 4, 5 hours maybe, but it was enough. It's all I needed.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. I'm amazed by that you could achieve that. The other question I have is something that you mentioned earlier about, your son. He's obviously growing up in a different environment to what you did. Obviously, he has a lot of wealth around him, a lot of things that he probably will take for granted because he doesn't know any better, right? You said that you are hoping that he has a certain appreciation and work ethic. Can you talk to me about how you're instilling this in him or what you're encouraging him to do currently?
I was talking to him about this yesterday. He'll probably never know hunger, right? Like I was hungry, literally. I didn't have money. I didn't have food. I had to figure it out. I'd go sit at a restaurant, wait for somebody to finish, and then slide in, hoping the waiter didn't catch me, right? Or I would, get tortillas and fill them with relish and ketchup because those were free at hot dog stands. And back then, I made the unfortunate mistake of being a four-letter word, vegan. Which has since changed. But look, you have hunger, you have drive, and those are things that you can't teach. You can't teach hunger. And then you have grit. And grit comes through several things, but mainly through discipline and being able to discipline yourself. There's like, or I should say, discipline yourself, being able to give yourself discipline, being able to delay gratification when necessary. And for my kid, he's grown up in a world that I don't understand. He goes to private school, right? The nannies of some of the kids in the school pick the kids up. The nannies pick them up in Lamborghinis. Like it's mind blowing to me, right? I had to save every penny that I had to buy a car. I didn't eat at a restaurant until I was like 16. Not really, not a real restaurant. And, just seeing the level of wealth that's around him does concern me, right? Because he doesn't have hunger in that way. But as parents, what we instill in him is the need to do cool stuff and be a productive human and be kind and do good work that's meaningful. Do meaningful stuff, man. That's what we tell him. And I think he gets it. But at the same time, we have to instill a type of almost like artificial discipline and artificial hunger. And that comes through doing things that are difficult. And I tell this to people all the time, people who I coach, people who I mentor, is that the easy things are okay. Those will be on automatic, right? But you got to put yourself in some uncomfortable situations to test your limits. And so for those reasons, we get him involved in sports. He's involved in mixed martial arts and jujitsu. He does things that are difficult, but at the end of the day, they build character. So that's all we can do. And then, lately, Jeannie, I've been thinking about this, and I think like the more and more I think about it, and it's woo woo, like to the extreme, is that just everybody's got their own spirit. And you can't change what somebody's spirit is. If somebody is an artist through and through and they're never going to make money, that person is an artist through and through and they're never going to make money no matter how much you nurture them. Right? It's just their nature. And if somebody's nature is to go out there and be dynamic and be an entrepreneur, then that's going to be their nature. Can they F it up? Yeah, absolutely. They can have both of those things up. But going with your nature, I think, is something impactful. Doing stuff because it's meaningful to you. And I teach people how to do that. I've got an Amazon course. I teach people how to make money creating products that mean something to people on Amazon and sell them. But I think it's when you're doing what's meaningful to you, even if you don't understand why it's meaningful, even if it doesn't equate, even if you're like, dude, I could be doing this other thing and making so much more money, but I'm doing this thing and it feels right. I think you're in the flow. And being in the flow, I think is all of our highest calling.
I'm reading this book at the moment, Think and Grow Rich. Have you read it?
Yeah.
I thought you would have. Now, so many coaches have recommended that I read this book since I started my business, Ginny Media, in 2018. But for some reason, I didn't pick it up until like literally 3 weeks ago. And what you shared there about, people, if they're artists, they'll be artists if they really live out that full potential. In Think and Grow Rich, there's one of the key pillars, I guess, of having that abundant mindset or the rich consciousness or the money consciousness is persistence. And one thread that I'm seeing, a very common thread amongst entrepreneurs, is especially those entrepreneurs who've gone through some hardship, whether it be hunger, they're deprived of something, they've gone through some trauma, where they've hit a stage of emotional rock bottom, where there's nothing to lose. Like we said, there's no one more dangerous than nothing to lose. It can go either way. You can either persist and rise in the ranks, or you could go, unfortunately, the other way. So I think that is also a key part of growing as an entrepreneur. And for you, from what you shared too, at 15, if you were sleeping in cars, if you had nothing to lose, that grit was kind of born out of there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. You know how sometimes you like clean your closet, right? And when you're starting, your closet looks fine. And then in the middle of it, it's a big mess before you are. And if somebody walks in, they're like, oh my God, Ginny, what are you doing? Like, this looks like a tornado hit, right? But then after you're done, then it looks great. Right. And I think the process of creation, the process of development is exactly that. When you're coming up with something new, when you're coming up with a new idea, or you're perfecting what your vision's going to be, you're creating something. It's a messy process. And in the initial phases, you're like, okay, well, I'm comfortable and I'm okay. And then it gets messy. Then stuff gets everywhere, right? Your ideas are everywhere. Your things are everywhere. Maybe you're spending your money. Like, everything is a mess. So there is a storm before the calm.
Absolutely. When you were 18, like we talked about what you were doing when you were 15, but when you were 18, when I was 18, I was working at a sports retail store. But when you were 18, you were scaling herbal ecstasy to 350 million. And then you got what, a $1 billion valuation, you said. What do you think was the biggest mistake you made in that period, and what did it teach you?
So I thought a lot about this. And I think the biggest mistake that anybody could make is working in a vacuum. So I was young in my teens, felt like I knew everything. We did over $1 billion in revenue. I was spending most of my time being on TV shows, talking to people, flying all over the world. And I had about 15 minutes of fame. It was pretty interesting. And I think what I realized is that if I was smarter, I would have taken counsel with people who knew more than I did and to trust their opinions, right? So find people who you trust, who've been where you are or where you want to be, and utilize their intelligence, their wisdom, their network to prevent that. So I'd say that'd be the first thing. The second thing I would say is that there's two parts to money. And most people don't understand this. If my kid was here and I quizzed him, he would immediately tell you this. Two parts to money. Part one is making it. Always been very good at that. Part two, take a guess, Jeannie.
Spending it.
No, Jeannie, no. That's
Was that
girl
a very
logic.
female
Come on.
answer to your question? Spend the money.
Keeping it.
Keeping it, yeah.
So making it and keeping it.
Keeping it.
And I never was good at keeping it. So despite the fact that I made over $1 billion in revenue, made a lot of people very rich, I never seemed to be able to manage to keep the majority of my wealth. And so I started learning about wealth and wealth preservation and the things you need to do in order to keep your wealth, and realized that keeping your wealth is almost as important, if not more important, than making the money. So, kind of in the later part of my life, I learned that. And that allowed me kind of to rebuild like the phoenix out of the ashes and rebuild my wealth again, but this time to keep it. So I think that's really important, because a lot of people get involved in different projects and they do a lot of things, but they don't think about like, how am I going to keep this money? How am I going to grow it? How am I going to make it compound? And there's a great book about this called The Psychology of Money. If you haven't read it, it's one of my favorites. It's a real legit book that kind of goes over those kinds of concepts.
You mentioned keeping money. A quote I heard recently was, "Rich is loud and wealth is quiet." It speaks to what you just shared about making money and keeping it. Because and that's why I'm like spending money, because people love spending it and then they want to kind of show their riches off, so to speak. When you were 18, that kind of wisdom that you acquired, it was quite accelerated for your age, right? You learned very quickly about like what you said, the psychology of money, how to preserve it. You knew how to make it. It's kind of like, for me, I think about when you come into that amount of money at such a young age, it's kind of like giving a 13-year-old who isn't experienced to drive a Ferrari with that much horsepower and speed the keys to that car. So you've got all this money and you've kind of honed in on what you needed to do to kind of, I guess, plan out the trajectory of your life. How have you continued to do that so successfully? I mean, you did it from such a young age, which is why it's so remarkable about your story, because there are people in their 30s, in their 50s that I know who don't have such wisdom, yet you acquired that and you had that need, or you had that kind of desire to learn this from a young age. So just talk me through that, Shane.
I read books. I have mentors. I have people who I speak to. I have network. There's a guy, he wrote a great book, and I talk about this on a lot of shows. I'm probably the biggest promoter of his book. The book is called Success Formula, and it's Professor Barabasi. I believe he's out of, I think, Portugal. I'm not sure. But he did this study where he studied successful people and kind of researched what the key factors are, like the similarities between people who are like really successful leaders, artists. He studied people like Warhol and Basquiat and business people. And he found that performance is important, right? Like if you're an artist, you got to be able to, throw some paint on a canvas. If you're a writer, you got to be able to put some words together to have them make sense. But that the people who perform the highest aren't necessarily the most successful. So he researched even deeper and found that there is one factor that's more important than all the other factors combined. Take a guess.
See, I feel like you're quizzing me, and I'm going to say what's instinctively wrong because I've said 3 things that are wrong. Drug dealers, what have I said? Drug dealers spend money. This could be a trifecta here, Shane. I would say the pursuing knowledge part.
Close. Network. Network amplifies whatever you do, right? Me and you decide to come out with a new cryptocurrency, a new Bitcoin, right? Probably do okay. I know you've got a good network. I've got a good network. It would do all right, but it's not going to be world changing. If the president of the United States, Donald Trump, comes out with one, it's going to be massive. If Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, they come out with one, it'll be multiple times, right? Because of their influence and their network, all the people that we know, right? And Basquiat, similarly, great artist. I would love to own some of his work. Incredible stuff, but there are a lot of people who are better, who have better color theory, better design, better art skills, and all that. Why was he so famous? Why are his paintings worth 60 million when the guy who's a professor of art and does the perfect piece that's the most beautiful thing get $5,000? It's because of his network. So I've learned over the years to build network, to build the people who I do business with, the people who I talk to. And that's what I've done. I mean, that's what we do through our agency, Podcast Cola, is we build network by getting people booked on great shows like yours. And I've built that company over the last 5 years where we represent business leaders, we represent authors, speakers, coaches, anybody who can benefit from getting their message out on shows like this. And I think that's been probably one of the single most impactful things that I've done for other people and for myself in the last few years.
I want to talk about Amazon. You call Amazon the great equalizer. What do you think most people misunderstand about selling on Amazon?
Well, most people don't understand how Amazon works, right? Most people are like, "Oh yeah, I'm buying something on Amazon. Amazon's, sending it to me." So Amazon does sell stuff. They are a retailer, but they're one of millions who sell on their platform. There are millions of individual sellers, people like me and you, who decide we want to have an Amazon store and to sell on Amazon. Is one of the great genius moves that Jeff Bezos came up with roughly around 2008, 2009. He opened the platform to third party sellers saying, hey, we're going to have a stronger platform and make more money if we don't have to stock everything. We're going to let other people stock it. And not only that, we'll pack and ship it for them. So when you go on Amazon, you buy your bottle of NyQuil or you buy your Advil or aspirin or whatever it is, chances are slim that you're actually getting it from Amazon. Likely you're getting from one of millions of third-party sellers that are also selling on Amazon. So you might get it by Amazon or you might get it from one of these third-party sellers. So I teach people how to become one of these third-party sellers. But moreover, I teach them how to create brands. And those brands they sell on Amazon, they make a lot of money on because they own that real estate. So because they're not selling somebody else's products. And I started in the early days where you're able to get Jeff Bezos on email. You could call. He wasn't the richest man in the world. Amazon was just picking up, and really learn the ropes on how you succeed on there. And I've created a lot of millionaires, a lot of successful people through what I've taught and the work that we've done on Amazon. So I have an agency where we do that work for people. It's like done for you. We do it for brands. And then I also have a course that people can take. And by the way, I'm happy to give it to anybody for free of your listeners so they can reach out. I'll give my email out at the end of the show and they can just reach out and we'll give them the course for free. Because my goal is to empower as many people as possible to take advantage of this platform because you can create a product, put it out on this platform. You need maybe, 10, 20K in savings over the course of a year to really do it, to launch a successful product, and you can compete with the big boys. There's nowhere else on the planet where you can do that and for very little money start a business that could become a multi-million-dollar company. And I've done that over and over again for myself, for other people on Amazon. We created the category of matcha pretty much in the United States. People weren't really into matcha until we brought it out. We were selling it on Amazon. Most of the stores who were selling matcha used to get it from us, and that became a really huge company, and we sold that for millions of dollars. And we do this repeatedly with products using a formula that I created over the years. So if anybody's interested, yeah, I give out my email on every show. So it's darkzess@gmail.com. Send me an email, put the Genie Show in the subject heading, and we'll send you the course for free. There's no obligation to buy anything. Just, it'll give you everything you need to start an Amazon company.
Amazing. We'll make sure that we put the email in the show notes there for you too, Shane. I want to ask you too. People have hesitations about scaling, or purely because they don't know how to scale, and there's many different ways that you can scale. What do you see to be the number one trap that entrepreneurs fall into when they're trying to scale their companies?
For what kind of business? For any business?
Any business, online especially, because I think there is a belief that sometimes uh, misaligned, but I'll let you kind of take the ropes on that one.
Sales is everything. I tell people this all the time. So, the number one thing keeping you from scaling is sales. So, then you got to think about how you get sales. I mean, I usually recommend finding your competitors and how they're getting sales and then go after their customers, which is usually the best way. I mean, you got to be aggressive, you've got to be ruthless, I mean ethically, but you got to be aggressive, you've got to be ruthless, and you've got to be willing to do whatever it takes in order to get the customer. And the second part of that is you got to do whatever it takes to maintain that customer and have them keep coming back. So a lot of people think, well, scaling is just sales. Sales is the most important part of it. The second most important part of it is keeping those customers and keeping them coming back. And I think most entrepreneurs are like scared of sales, but they don't realize that that's the whole business. You can actually have a kind of crappy business and be more successful than everybody else if your sales are better. The product actually doesn't have to be better. As long as your sales are better, you'll be making more money than the next guy. So it just stands to logic that if you have great sales and a great product, and you're willing to do whatever it takes, doesn't mean you have to do whatever it takes, you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to achieve that scale. It can be achievable. And then also some people suck and they don't know that they suck. I look at products all the time and I'm like, dude, you suck. Like the first step in that is realizing that you suck, right? Like like we've all gone to small businesses where we look outside and we go, oh my God, like he really shouldn't have had his nephew design the sign, right? Like maybe the food here is bomb, but like, dude, like seriously, like the sign, or like seriously, the furniture in here, like, are you serious? Like, people don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And that's the biggest problem. So again, I recommend to people, seek mentorship, seek people who are where you want to be, and try to get them to coach you, to mentor you, see what you have to bring to the table to do that. And really, like, if you want to scale, look at who's done it before in the same or similar category and see if you can steal their playbook.
You've mentioned quite a few things throughout our conversation, Cheyene. You've mentioned network, mentorship, coaching, make money, but keeping money. Beyond the platforms, the stories, the businesses, what would you define as a true win in any entrepreneurial journey?
Well, entrepreneurship is about making money. So a true win is having one person buy the product or service that you're offering and it being a meaningful product that impacts and changes their life in some way. It doesn't have to be like fireworks in the sky story, right? You could just do something slightly better than the other guy, tell a better story, but still have it be meaningful, because there's so many different things that we need, especially in this time of AI and all this new technology that's coming out that's so exciting, that it could just be something that fills a void and solves a problem for somebody.
I want to kind of pivot or change lanes into a subject that is broached quite a bit, but marriage and entrepreneurship. They say finding your choice in partner, especially for an entrepreneur, is such a key stake in your success. Tell me about your journey on meeting your wife. What was the process of going, okay, this is someone who can support my journey, my goals, my dreams. How do you support her? Walk me through how you got to where you are now and how you continue to maintain the relationship that you do.
When I met her, and still, she's a very well known, well reputed publicist. She does a lot of human rights work. She used to work for Kofi Annan in the United Nations. She still consults for a lot of those. She was a producer for MTV and a lot of different TV shows. and she handles clients in arts, politics, and culture. She's more kind of in the philanthropic world and the world of like human rights and social activism for people that are underprivileged. So she does kind of, she manages our family fund, and kind of takes care of that stuff, but she still, is very active in the world of human rights. So I think, in that way we complement each other. But yeah, I mean, how many friends do I have where their business life is deeply impacted by having a bad spouse? Like that all too often happens. And if you're not at peace at home, you're not going to be in the flow state, right? Because all your energy is going dealing with somebody who is demanding energy in a negative way. And it might not be that they're a bad person. It might just be that it's not a fit, or it's not a fit right now, or it was a fit and it's not a fit later. These things aren't black and white. Oftentimes there's lots of like gray areas. And I think it's super important that whoever you're with, that you do have those financial discussions and you discuss how money will work in your family. And when you have children, how it'll work with them and who pays for what, and how you guys, most importantly, as a couple, as a team, are going to up level your game if that's what you want to do. And so we had all those conversations before we got married. And so our relationship works pretty well in that way. Like she's a real positive and powerful factor. It doesn't mean that we don't, argue, or we don't have our differences, or, we're both two strong alpha people. And that usually um, comes down to us looking back at what our values are and what our goals are as a family, and kind of deferring to what's in the best interest of the family, which is what we do.
That's amazing. So you actually set the expectations from the get-go before you got married. Like, this is the conversations that we had. Are those syncs weekly with your wife? Like, how often do you still have those kind of conversations?
Yeah, we do daily check-ins, we do weekly check-ins, and we have dinner together as a family every night. So that's an important thing where our kids there. We talk about highs and lows, what worked in your day, what didn't. We go through that, and so we're always talking about it. My wife also currently is running the podcast company, Podcast Cola. So she manages that through her PR expertise and her PR team. So they do that. So we're constantly talking to each other about that stuff. But it's not like, I think people have the wrong idea if they think like, oh, you're gonna like sit down and write down your goals and then go out there and achieve them and whatever. And like, life doesn't work that way, right? Stuff comes all the time, and curveballs and things that you weren't expecting. So it's just like an ongoing dialogue, and moreover, kind of just like an understanding that yeah, we're gonna have differences, but ultimately we love each other and we want to make something better, make the world better, and we do that better by working together cooperatively. That works. And she's awesome because she gives me space to do what I want to do, and I give her space to do what she wants to do, and then we come together for all our family stuff.
You talked about curveballs because they're things that are unexpected. You don't plan for them. It just kind of shows up out of the blue. And it is a true test of character if how you tackle that as a team. But talk me through how like a curveball may have like completely caught you off guard. How did you get through that with your wife, even just independently? Like, I'd love to kind of tap into your resilience, Shane.
When I was younger and kind of in the flow of verbal ecstasy and all that stuff, like life tended to be a lot more dramatic, especially me being on TV every day, and that kind of stuff, and that in that the world of the 90s rave scene. Nowadays my life is much more stable. There aren't massive surprises, but there are stuff that come up every day. Like a few years back, our house was flooded and we had to deal with that. Currently in the fires, we lost a house to the Palisades fires here. And so that's something that we had to deal with that was completely unexpected. But those things will happen, and it's okay. And we together as a family, because we have our values and our compass for how we do things, and we just guide through it. I think it's more like a general question. You asked a specific question, but I think it's much more general about like, when stuff happens, like, what do you do? Do you freak out? Do you panic? Or do you have a system, right? You're like, all right, guys, here's what we're gonna do. Like when COVID happened, right? We were like, okay, yeah, oh, this is happening. Okay, now we're bleaching our groceries. Okay, so yeah, oh, and we're wearing masks and we can't leave our house. Can't leave our house, right? So we got together and we were like, hey, we're just going to ramp up on Amazon. People still need stuff. People still need to eat. People still need products. And we started ramping stuff up and we were working. My garage was filled with products. And, I had employees here working out of my garage. We closed down our office, which was in a big skyrise, and we ramped up. It was the best 3 or 4 years ever in history on Amazon. More people became multimillionaires selling on Amazon during COVID than any other period in history ever. And so it was great, right? Well, at first we didn't know there's uncertainty, and uncertainty is what most people fear. But if you embrace uncertainty, a lot of good things can come of it. And I think that's like the COVID example. That's what happened, right? You got to be able to roll with the punches, I think. And I think that's been something, that I've personally have had no choice of, right? Punches come, you got to be able to roll with them.
It's kind of two things. You see problems as opportunities, and there's an acceptance part of it. You're like, this is how it is. How am I going to adapt? How am I going to adjust? How am I going to be agile? And the other part of it is the problems that you probably had when you're 15. If you were to have those problems now, the way you deal with it would be very different, because after all the experience you've had solving, I kind of look at problems like puzzles. I would love to have the problems or the puzzles that I did in 2018 Ginny Media rather than 2025 Ginny Media, because it's just a passing thought. But as your problems get bigger, as your puzzles become bigger to solve, it means you are growing. So that is a key part of it.
I recommend to almost everybody that they should try Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I think it's one of the best sports ever. I've been doing it for years now, I think 8 years. And one of the things that you realize is that when you're on the mats, and for the people who don't know, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is a grappling art. So it's basically wrestling in a lot of aspects. You learn as you go. So you're expecting, hey, I'm bigger than this guy. I'm gonna, be able to take him pretty easily. And then you realize that guy's much more skilled than you, and he's on top of you, strangling you. Then you better think of some stuff really quick. There's no time to panic. There's just time to take action. And similarly in life, the same kind of stuff happens. Stuff pops up. There's no human on earth that hasn't been a victim to some unexpected thing happening and messing up their day, right? There's glitches in the matrix. If I make a matrix example, right? There's times when things happen completely unexpectedly. And what separates the people who generally succeed in life and the people who don't is in my opinion how you deal with those things and the perspective that you put. I tell my kid this all the time. You create your own universe. Like there's a billion things going on out there, and your perspective on what's happening in that moment, like, is it happening to you? Is it happening for you? Is it happening with you? How are you seeing this? It can change everything. Your perspective on how you see that curveball coming, like, oh, this is a good lesson for me. If I learn this, I can do a lot of other things. Or, oh my God, I'm being attacked by this thing. That's terrible. I'm going to be depressed about it. All those are our choices. Sometimes I feel like you don't have a choice about all the things that happen to you, but you do have a choice about how you see them in life.
Absolutely. That's really great advice there, Shaheen. I completely agree with that. I want to kind of end on your upcoming show, which Paris Hilton is producing. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Is this a documentary or is this like a reenactment?
It's going to be a narrative, and it might have some documentary threads, or they're talking about also doing a documentary, but I think it's going to be a narrative kind of hybrid doc. So
Is there like someone playing you? Can we expect stock footage of kids Cheyenne? Like, is someone doing that? Like,
there should be some stock footage in there, but yeah, and there should be somebody playing me. So I can't speak to who it's going to be right now. I know they've been reaching out to a lot of people, so we'll see who the best person is for that.
that's amazing. Are you a part of that casting process? Are you going to be coaching this actor on how to be Cheyenne sleeping behind a speaker when he was 15? Like, I'm curious how the method acting is going to go out with this.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be some of that. So I'm sure there's going to be some of that. I don't have too much control over it. The production studios
Yeah.
doing most of that stuff, but I'm sure they're going to consult with me about different aspects of it and how it's going to go. I'll let you know once we start
Yeah.
filming.
Please do. What are you most excited about that? Because that's a pretty cool thing, having Paris Hilton. By the way, Paris Hilton, like, she's kind of, I feel like the last few years she's been a little quiet, apart from a couple of TikToks she's made, which has been hilarious. But having her backing, I mean, she's an heiress, obviously, she was had a lot of clout in the early 2000s and 90s. But how does it feel being backed by someone like that?
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I think it's great. And she's such a nice person and really a talented human being, right? She was the original influencer before the Kardashians.
Yeah.
I think, this resonates with her specifically because, she was around the club days. So she was around the 90s electronic music scene, the rave scene. And so I think that's huge. I think it's awesome. And I think with her on board, it's going to really propel the film. So I'm excited.
Because not many people know this. Maybe they do now because obviously internet. But Kim Kardashian, one of her first appearances on the internet was being photographed with Paris Hilton at a club. Is that correct?
I think she was, if I'm not mistaken, I think she was Paris's assistant.
There you go. All right. We might have to fact check that, Shane. I think you're onto something. But I do think like she saw that was like that's how she was introduced to the world. That's fantastic. Shane, been so amazing talking to you. I'm wondering, I'm going to leave this last question. You've got a lot of achievements under your belt so far. You've started very young, achieving these incredible things. What do you want said about you at your eulogy when you're not there, the legacy that you leave in this world?
Is that dude really dead?
Is he really dead, or is he just napping because he didn't nap properly when he was 15 behind the speaker?
Yeah, that's funny. I kind of think about that a lot. I don't know what I want them to say in my eulogy. I mean, once I'm dead, I'm good. Just come haul me away and I'll be done. But I think I tell people this all the time. One of the interesting things, I'm a huge fan of history, right? And I love Egyptian history. I mean, I spent days at the British Museum and at all these different museums looking at this stuff, right? And so I look at the Egyptians and I'm like, man, you look at these like sarcophaguses, right? And there's like they're made from solid gold, and there's another one inside that's gold, and there's another one inside that's got rubies and all this stuff on it. You're like, wow, they were really wasteful. Like, look at what they did. And then you think about it, you're like, no, they're not thinking about this life or the next life. And what does that mean? That means that they're thinking several hundreds of years in the future, somebody's going to mention my name. Well, why are they thinking that? So the ancient Egyptians believed that each man lives two deaths. Death number one is when your body dies. And death number two is when the last person who knows your name speaks it for the last time. So when we unearth these artifacts that we think might be like wasteful and like over the top, and oh my God, he made a gold, sarcophagus, and we see the guy's name and we mention it, he still lives. And similarly, it's a good perspective when we're doing our work, stuff that's meaningful, to think about it as, hey, is something that I do in my lifetime going to be remembered and echoed through time in a meaningful way? And when you look at things in that perspective, it gives you a completely different view on life. And I think that's probably one of the most meaningful things about that.